Good evening, Canada. We are back with our Voice of Canada weekly talk show. Your host, Asphandiar Wadiwalla, my co host, Cindy Young. We have a very dynamic VIP speaker, guest speaker, Ruby Sahota, who is the MP, Member of Parliament, as well as she's the Minister of Democratic Reforms. So, first, let's all rise to sing the national anthem of Canada.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the truth Lord strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Welcome back after our national anthem of Canada. We have a pleasure of having Ruby Sahota, MP and Minister Democratic Reforms. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself to our viewers.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure.
It's an honor for me to be here today. Like you said, my name is Ruby Sahota. I'm the Member of Parliament currently for Brampton North since 2015. After for this next upcoming election, my riding boundaries are going to be quite different. I'm going to be representing two municipalities. So it will be now called Brampton North Caledon.
Wow.
Brampton North Caledon. So
two cities of region of Peel.
yes, so for the region of Peel, I will be, working both with the city of Brampton and the city of Caledon, and I look very forward to that. My current role is the role of Minister of Democratic Institutions and Minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency of Southern Ontario.
Awesome.
And it's been a pleasure and an honor to be doing this role.
It's really a pleasure that you're working for Canada.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Cindy Young, and I am the co-host for Voice of Canada this evening. And a very special warm welcome to our very special guest, MP Minister Ruby Sahota. And a very warm welcome to you. And thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself already. Is there anything else you'd like to add just about yourself? Something that you're doing within your role as MP?
Yeah, what led me to become a member of Parliament some years ago is my desire to advocate for the community. I was a different form of an advocate in my prior job. I was a lawyer who practiced commercial litigation in the areas of trade and represented many different small to medium-sized businesses and manufacturing when they ended up having litigation issues. So my focus was complex litigation. And currently, I'm finding myself in my role of Economic Development Minister, I'm finding that a lot of what I learned in my role of representing mid to medium-sized businesses at that time is a really great experience for this role, because I'm able to understand what their business relations look like, what that environment of trade and manufacturing world entails. And we want to be able to really grow our economy in Ontario.
Manufacturing more in Canada.
Amazing.
Yes, especially in Ontario. And it really is, we're the economic hub of manufacturing for Canada. And my role has allowed me the ability to be able to provide a lot of companies that have good ideas, that are enhancing our manufacturing capacity by building efficiencies that are leading to growth through AI technology and other different technologies that they're implementing. So our agency looks very closely at where we can provide support and help to
Lovely.
these
Awesome.
growing companies.
Awesome.
Really important for those companies for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, especially right now.
Yes, especially right now.
Minister, as you look after the portfolio of democratic reforms, so can you explain in detail what are your duties as the Minister of Democratic Reforms?
Yeah. So right now they call them democratic institutions.
Institution.
My duty really is to protect these institutions, the electoral process, our independent bodies that we've created. Parliament also falls within my jurisdiction. The procedural rules and that are followed, and to make sure that those procedural rules are implemented, and that currently what we have going on is a lot of conversation around the upcoming election and foreign interference.
Definitely.
Also, the past two elections, we had a big commission, an independent commission, look at this issue. And a report was issued in late January. Justice Hogue did this public inquiry where she invited many people over several months, reviewed tens of thousands of over 50,000 documents that were confidential, to be able to really address this issue and understand it better and raise awareness for Canadians. So it is an issue that we are dealing with, and many other countries around the world. Foreign interference is a real thing. We are dealing with it on the front of many countries. But she has held that our institutions are robust. There are some recommendations that have been provided to me, and we're now reviewing those recommendations and implementing some of them, and some we have already implemented. So my role very much includes making sure that we continue to evolve as threats and different things evolve, and misinformation, disinformation on social media is something she
from
also,
the hearts of Canadians.
Yes, it's also something that she's declared is an existential crisis and threat to our democracy. And so we're trying to figure out how we manage Canadians' rights of freedom of expression and speech on these platforms, but also make sure that those that are learning and reading information from these platforms are aware how much weight they should be giving different sources. And I think it's really important for all age groups to be educated on how we interact with social media.
Yes, really, really important. Minister, as we are all familiar with our Canadian Senate, that they cannot be called a democratic institution, as senators are appointed by the stroke of the pen of the sitting Prime Minister, which is not always viewed as fair for Canadians. Can you examine some other democratic countries and how they appoint their senators?
So we are in line with our Commonwealth,
Commonwealth and the Crown.
Westminster system. The UK also has a very similar system to the one we have today. It has been enshrined in our Constitution to have two bodies that represent Canadians. The elected body, which I represent, the House of Commons, and then, of course, the upper house, which is the Senate.
The Royal Senate, the Red
Royal
Chamber.
Senate is been reformed under the time of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He is the first Prime Minister ever to put in place reforms for the Senate. We now have in place an independent Senate that is not appointed according to party lines, but is appointed by an independent committee that goes through a selection process of another committee that I used to sit on, the Procedure and House Affairs Committee.
And they approve the senators, senators.
They take in all the applications of Canadians throughout the country. They go through a very rigorous process. They come up with a very short list of senators to be approved from each province. Within that short list of 2 or 3 people, the Prime Minister then is able to, once that short list is created by the committee, decide on who is to be appointed. But but the committee themselves could also make a final decision. But it's when they come down to maybe a few that the Prime Minister has the ability. However, what we see now in the Senate is you have different groups in the Senate. You have Conservative senators that were appointed under Stephen Harper and previous Prime Ministers. You have a group of, I think, government senators, they call them.
The current government senators appointed.
The current ones are called independent senators.
Wow.
And so there's different groups within the Senate that have formed, but there are more independent senators than any other group of senators at this time.
Awesome.
I hope that any government that comes into power in the coming, in this next election or in the coming time, they too will commit themselves to continuing this process of independent selection of senators. But if we revert back under a conservative government to appointing partisan conservative senators, then this was an experiment of Prime Minister Trudeau's that will unfortunately revert back and get lost. But although there's been some pain and in terms of the level of cooperation we used to see, I think it is a good outcome that we will have for the long term.
That's true.
Yeah.
As we are talking about the Senate only, will you inform our viewers what is the duration of each senator? 9 years?
The duration of Senate is up to the age of 75.
75,
wow.
or any number of years also?
No, they can retire whenever earlier if they like.
And they can stay in as long as they want
Up to the age of 75.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
But many retire earlier as well. Some wait till that age. It all really depends on what they've got going on in life. We had many vacancies.
And they were recently filled also by Prime Minister Trudeau.
They were recently filled before his tenure ended because it is a responsibility of a Prime Minister to not leave vacancies. However, we saw many retire before the age of 75. So I don't think we necessarily have the problem that some countries often have of people wanting to clinch to power forever.
There should be a duration. But that is also more democratic, because this is just like a lottomax. A person who is elected a senator gets a lottery. That person till attaining the age of 75 can be a senator and enjoys all perks. Whereas the MPs
it's like judges as well. I mean, we don't elect our judges. Some countries elect judges. It's a conversation that is interesting.
True.
It is something that would require us to reopen our constitution, get all of the provinces involved. So I believe if there is enough of a push that Canadians make on this issue, that at some point there could be a government that takes up this issue and tries to, revise the way the Senate is formed. But at this time, we really haven't seen that type of pressure. There is definitely an ask for a small group of people that bring up the point. So the power remains in the people. I do think that eventually, if they think that this is a worthy cause, there could be a future government that takes it up. But for now, it is a second body of thought. They do not create legislation. The elected body creates legislation.
And they approve
They are to view legislation to
make it a law,
improve it for something that they really think is a minor improvement or adjustment. But if the overwhelming elected body has passed a legislation, it is not their place to really block or deny that legislation, only really amend it or adjust it. Yeah.
And then it becomes law. Once they sign it, the Senate approves it.
Yes. And if there's amendments, it comes back to the House of Commons. The House of Commons then does have to vote on it again. There's a very thorough process.
True. And again, we have to keep in mind that Canada is a sovereign country, and our head is King Charles III.
Yes.
And we have to respect the crown.
Well, yes, the crown still is our figurehead, but if you've lived in Canada for a long time, you have seen that the crown is not involved.
Not involved in any of our
day-to-day functions or lawmaking.
They are a sovereign head.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Mister, by profession, you're a lawyer, and you did talk a little bit about that already as well. Inform us, did you ever practice law here in Canada? And when did you get elected as a federal MP from Brampton North in 2015? If you can give us a little bit of information about that.
Yeah, I actually went to law school in the U.S. And both me and my husband are Canadian, born and raised here in Canada.
You were born in Canada?
Yes.
Wow,
Yes.
wow.
And so I was born in Toronto. My husband was born in a small
Lovely.
town
That's a
in
generation. Now the
BC.
new generation is
Oh.
born in
Yes,
Canada.
yes,
Yeah.
he was born in Clearwater, BC. It's a
Wow.
very small
Nice.
lumber town out
Mhm.
in BC.
Lovely.
And grew up in Edmonton, and then eventually their family made their way over to Ontario.
Mhm.
I, however, lived most of my life in Ontario, but I did spend some years in the U.S., and that was the time I went to law school,
Mhm.
and I practiced out there for the substantial portion of my practice. I did do cross-border litigation work, but my practice was from the U.S. until I moved back and got into politics here.
Mhm.
Oh, interesting.
Minister, inform us and our viewers, are you going to be re-elected? Are you seeking re-election for the third term?
Yes, this would be my fourth term.
Fourth term, rather, yeah. Congratulations.
And I am seeking re-election
for the fourth term.
for the fourth
Fourth
term.
term.
It hasn't been for full terms because we had minority parliaments and elections that
Were held,
didn't
yeah.
held before the 4-year period. So like I said, I was first elected in 2015.
15, yeah.
It's been a little over 9 years now. And I am seeking re-election, and it seems like there will be an election. This
By end April or early May, the predictions are.
The predictions are probably very accurate. I can't say for sure, but that's what I'm hearing as well. And what I can say is that the current government under Prime Minister Trudeau, the Liberal government, was elected in 2021, this minority parliament.
Mhm.
And we've gone over 3.5 years.
3.5 years.
Generally, a minority parliament lasts 18 months
18
or
months.
less.
That's so, but now this time.
But this has been
Long haul.
record-breaking.
Yeah.
It's the record-breaking
You're
longest.
practically completing the tenure.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's Canada's
With the
longest running.
cooperation of NDP.
Yes,
Mhm.
Canada's longest running minority parliament. So we are, this October, we would be at the 4-year mark.
4 years, yeah.
But you have seen that there is definitely a lot of desire to call an election on behalf of all parties in the House. We also have had the resignation of Prime Minister Trudeau.
And tomorrow is his last day in office.
Tomorrow is
Yes.
his last day, and we will be swearing in a new Prime Minister, Prime Minister Mark Carney. And after he is sworn in as the 25th Prime Minister of Canada,
Wow.
I believe that there will continue to be a desire for Canadians to want to have an election and to elect their Prime Minister or elect their members of Parliament and elect a party in place according to the parliamentary system that we have in Canada. So we are dealing with a lot of issues down south. You saw that Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, also felt he needed a renewed mandate. I think there was a lot of controversy about that, but there's no denying that at the federal level, we are overdue for an election. There has been calls for an election for some time.
Yeah. But it's a good thing what he has done.
Yeah.
We are in right direction.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, and I think we have a leader now in place that is got a different vision, got different experience than the previous Prime Minister. And it's a leader that meets this moment, right? Every time there's a need for a different face, a different skill set of experience that's brought. And I really believe that Prime Minister designate Carney does have the experience.
He will be doing a good job.
Yeah, yes, I believe so.
I believe so too.
Yeah.
And with the way he won, landslide victory of 86%.
It's been unheard of as well. There's a lot of groundbreaking things happening.
In the first round, 86% was not a joke.
Yes,
whereas the second person is far, far behind.
Yeah, we thought Prime Minister Trudeau had broken all records with over 80% support in 2013.
No, he carried the name because he was the governor of our State Bank of Canada as well as England.
Yes. Yes, so I think people really came out and without having to really twist people's arms and push them into reminding them to vote in this leadership, many people I saw were excited and wanted to sign up and get involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that was great.
It's
It
good.
turned
It's
out to be
really
really
nice to
great,
see
and
it.
we are all
It's-
hoping to
it's
see
good
the
to see.
swanning tomorrow.
It's good to
swearing in
see, and I'm
for the
also
oath.
glad that the party followed some of the recommendations that Justice Hogue had put in place from
Mhm.
her inquiry, and those recommendations were that parties should only allow people who are citizens and PRs
Mhm.
to vote, and that there should be a rigorous way to be able to identify and verify that those people truly are citizens, when especially when conducting an online vote, which this was. And so far, so good. We have not heard any, abuse of the system or any
Good.
threats to the
Mhm.
system's
System.
authenticity or safety in terms of any foreign interference or even domestic interference that could have
That's
taken
amazing.
place. So
Good.
it's really good. So we can be
Yes.
confident
Confident
that Mark Carney was elected appropriately
appropriately
by
and in
people
the right
living in
way.
this country.
And
Yeah.
hope
very good.
after his swearing and taking of oath, he will be also swearing a small cabinet too.
He will be swearing in a very small cabinet tomorrow, and after that, I believe we can predict that there will be in the coming days or weeks
Correct.
an election, and then Canadians as a whole can go to the polls in a general election
Definitely.
Right.
and be able to vote in person under the authority of Elections Canada and decide as to who
No,
they
no,
think
we are very
is most
hopeful
suited.
that with Mark Carney coming, the polls of the party will also increase.
Yeah, they
Yes.
have.
Definitely, and they have.
There
They are
has.
growing,
I'm feeling a big change in my
Big
riding.
change.
Yeah.
I think so too.
and people are feeling confident.
Yes.
People who had
Yes. A
already
little bit more hope.
announced that they are not going to contest the elections are returning.
Well, Canadians are united, and
Yes.
I think we went through a period where all of us saw that it had become a little bit common for us not to feel so proud about our country.
Mhm.
And right now we are seeing, unfortunately, took a little Donald Trump's interventions for us to really see what we have and appreciate everything we do have in Canada. But it has been a uniting force, and I'm seeing Canadians really come
Us-
together.
They have stood together.
Yes, and
Yes.
I just want to
Very
say
patriotic. You
I-
can
it's
definitely
beautiful.
see it.
It's beautiful to
Yeah.
see. I really appreciate it, and I want to thank Canadians for getting together and uniting and making sure we fight as a country when it comes to any economic threats that we face.
Absolutely.
We'll be taking a short break and we'll be with you soon. Welcome back after a short break in our weekly talk show, Voice of Canada. Your host, Asphandiar Wadiwalla, my co-host, Cindy Young, and our guest speaker is a very dynamic member of Parliament and Minister of Democratic Reforms, Honorable Ruby Sahota.
Thank you.
Welcome back after our break.
Yes,
Go ahead.
we've been having a lot of fun.
We have been and learning a lot. Minister, if you can inform us, what are the major development projects you undertook during your term in office as MP for our House of Commons in Ottawa?
Yeah, so 3 terms and
3 terms.
3 terms, and
You're a seasoned politician now.
Yes.
It's funny.
No, we can
a part
see
of me still feels like a kid, and at days
No,
I
no,
feel
you're not.
super old.
Time goes fast.
Yeah, I had different feelings on different mornings,
Yeah.
but I would say, the reason I got into politics in the very beginning was so that my community could feel comfortable coming to their member of parliament to discuss any issue that they had on their mind, and also that their member of parliament could relate to people that are living in Brampton, that grew up in Brampton. I moved to Brampton from Toronto when I was in grade 4 and have been living in the community mainly ever since, other than my short time that I had spent away for school or university.
Mhm.
And I can relate, I think, to a lot of the people that are living there and growing up there. We have a very diverse population, but a very immigrant-heavy population.
Mhm.
My parents, too, were immigrants that came to this country in the 70s. And I felt that a lot of immigrants want to see, like my father used to be very engaged in politics
Active
back
in politics,
home,
yeah,
but
as well
he
as here.
really wanted to get involved here, but often felt that maybe there was a little bit of a barrier because of being a newer immigrant and language and other things, and that the next generation that is first Canadian, can get involved, can become that voice of the community. And I really felt as I was practicing law that there was something bigger that I wanted to do
Mhm.
and represent more than one client at a time.
Awesome.
And now I get to represent a whole community and the country as a whole. And so my desire has always been to be a strong voice for the community and to be the most accessible member of parliament that
Visible,
I can be.
visible.
And very visible. And so, in terms of what I've delivered, I feel I've very much delivered on that priority. There have been lots of other things along the way in terms of the relationship we have with our municipality is one that is extremely close. Any project that the municipality has brought forward to us as a government, it's one that I've advocated for. We have green electric buses around the city, a pilot project that's one is first of its kind in Canada. And there's a lot more things to do. There's been a lot of different, we've revitalized the floodplains in downtown Brampton so that we can start building up. There have been so many infrastructure projects, hundreds of different parks that we've improved, and much, much more. But I still always go back to the fact that there are a lot of people in the community that sometimes feel scared or hesitant to go to their member of parliament. And I do feel from what the feedback that I receive, that I get people coming from all over, and they feel that they come to me because they feel comfortable talking to me about their problems, and they trust.
You're approachable.
Yes, and then they trust
know
that I will convey that information, that they can speak to me in their mother tongue or another language, or they can bring somebody with them, and that I would be effectively be able to communicate that message back in Ottawa from my community. And that really still is my number one goal and will remain my number one goal if I'm given
Keep up the good work.
term. Yeah,
Keep
thank
up
you.
the good work. Minister, inform us about your early life. As you are born, you and your even hubby is born in Canada. Talk about your present family.
Yeah, so we met in our university years, but it's quite fascinating because I think we can relate to a lot of different people. Both our families immigrated in the early 70s to mid 70s. Some having, like my husband has an uncle that came here over 100 years ago.
Oh, wow.
But our immediate families came in the 70s. And there's been a lot of trials and tribulations, and we've learned from watching our parents come here and build a home. And my husband's a doctor. He got a great education in the public school system.
He's a practicing doctor?
Yes, he is. And before getting into law, I was a practicing lawyer as well. And I'm a believer of neighbors looking out for each other and community that really only exists in Canada, which is this community where we are not just inward looking. We make sure that everyone has a basic quality of life in Canada, a great public school system. That is what makes me a liberal. I may not be somebody who oversees education, that being a provincial jurisdiction, but I truly believe that we need to protect these types of systems in our country, our healthcare system, because I know that my family's benefited from those types of systems. They were able to raise good families and get us good educations without having to spend a fortune on that education. And I want to make sure that that's something that's still valued and we don't move away from that. My son is in a public school.
Lovely.
We haven't moved away.
That's an example. Being a minister, your son goes to a public school.
I am a minister. My husband's a doctor, but my son,
you
is
can
in
easily
a public
afford
school.
a private school even for the children.
But I think, and I'm seeing a lot of people, and to each their own, move into that direction. But I'm truly somebody who deeply believes that if we don't have diversity in our school systems, people of all backgrounds and all different socioeconomic means, and then we truly won't have a valuable experience for that child growing up. And that's really important. To me, it was very important for me to understand what some kids' lives are like at home, those that maybe get breakfast in the morning and those that can't afford it, those that
you believe in equality.
I believe in having diversity of experiences and for having inclusion. And so I would say that's something that me and my husband are strong advocates and proponents of, and that is why we moved back to Canada after being in the US for some time, because we really felt that although US has certain opportunities that there was something different about our culture in Canada
True.
versus the American culture. And I am really wanting, after that experience, to make sure that we don't lose that culture. And now with the threats to our sovereignty that we're hearing every day, whether they are real or not, we need to take them seriously.
But we stand united. That's the biggest thing. Nobody will be able to annex Canada.
Yeah, and I think we need to value the things that we do have and improve on those things. Of course, we can always improve.
Reevaluate.
Yeah, reevaluate and make them better, and that's something we need to invest in. Healthcare is something that I strongly believe is something that
Which
needs
is going down and
better
down.
investment in, and we've got to protect it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Minister, will you be able to clarify for us a controversy that's going on since a few years that you got elected due to your dad's control of Dixie Gurdwara? Did I pronounce that correct? In what capacity your dad is serving at Dixie Gurdwara? And is he a Pradhan G or some other position?
I think you meant Pradhan G, but so my dad was on the board of directors,
Dixie Gurdwara.
many years ago in the 90s at Dixie Gurdwara. He has no longer been on the board since before I got elected, and but he's been involved in whether it's that Gurdwara, lots of different community work over the years. And like I said, he was always very politically, socially active in not-for-profit groups, and of course, one of those being Dixie Gurdwara as well. It created a lot of good networks and relationships for us, and it also created a spirit of seva in our household, which is giving back to the community. And I would say one of the most valuable lessons my father has taught me is that we are all given limited time on this earth, and be very, very intentional about how you spend that time on this earth. Many conversations we used to have when he would drive me to school would circulate around that, and he would say that I don't care, what you do in your, professional life, but remember that everything you do will be leaving behind some type of legacy, and what you have to be intentional about what legacy you want to leave behind, right? So can't take your wealth with you, but you can definitely leave behind a name.
You're far-sighted.
And that's really important, right? So that's important for us to all get involved in some way or another.
Every
so
community has got a little bit of gossips, and people who are competing with each other, they spread various gossips. That's a common thing. That's a human nature.
I actually think I'm quite privileged to come from a household that where my dad volunteered a lot of his time, and it taught us volunteerism.
And he must be really proud of you.
He is very proud of me. He is very proud of me. He used to be the sarpanch of his village back home before he came here, and he was one of the youngest to ever be elected in the state of Punjab. So elections are something that, he had some experience in.
So it's in the blood. I can say the politics is in the blood.
It might be. I mean, it was also a form of bonding for us. But, I have two other siblings. They, although are very active in supporting and helping me, they're not interested in getting into politics themselves. However, I was one of the three that wanted to study political
You're
science.
The eldest
wanted to
among the siblings?
No, I'm the middle.
You're in the middle.
I'm the middle, but I don't know. Every child is different, and for me, it's just something that was always an interest or a passion of mine. Yeah.
Minister, do you be in another ministerial position in the future with Mark Carney, our new leader?
I would be honored and privileged to serve in the cabinet or any capacity within Parliament under, Prime Minister Carney. It's really an honor and a privilege to be a member of Parliament.
Definitely.
And since 2015 till now, I've held different roles, but really the role that's most valuable is to represent my community. And if given the chance, and after this next election, I'll continue to work my hardest.
Very good.
Yeah.
And we will look forward to having you back as the minister, because last oath we saw you.
Yes, we'll
on
see.
the TV. Go ahead.
From January to December 2024, you also served as the Chief Government Whip. for one whole year.
Mhm.
What were your duties in that role?
What is a whip?
Yeah, like what
Government whip.
Yeah, I've
Explain
never
to us.
heard of
That's
that either.
something new.
For about,
People will be hearing.
I got to train a little bit before I got that role. I used to
Mhm.
be the deputy whip before I became the chief government
Wow.
whip.
Wow.
And the whip is a traditional role within the Westminster system.
Mhm.
Actually, I believe the UK has several of them. Maybe they need a lot of discipline, but it is a disciplinary role to some degree, some will say. But really, I think as time has evolved, it used to be the person who would work very closely with the House Leader's office,
Mhm.
identify when votes are taking place, how caucus will be voting
Mhm.
in response to any piece of
All the
legislation.
rules have to be set. No.
I have to be able to predict and understand
Uh-huh.
what the outcome of any vote will be.
Mhm.
So it is my
that's
job
interesting.
to work with across the aisle as well with other parties
Oh wow.
to see how they're going to be voting on legislation, to be able to negotiate, discuss that, talk with the ministers responsible to make sure I can identify any areas where they might need to do more work in order to have a
Amazing.
legislation passed.
Yeah.
So really, very much I was responsible for passing legislation and making sure that our caucus was as united as possible, or they had the freedom on certain pieces of legislation to express themselves, represent their constituents. So it really does depend bill to bill as to what position we'll take. If there's clarification, understanding, more work to be done before we can get consensus around the parliament on any piece of legislation. That is the work of a whip.
Wow, interesting.
It's also to it's also a little bit of the HR person
Mhm.
because we don't have a formal HR like human resources. So when members of parliament have issues or concerns of any kind,
That role also you played.
they
Very
bring
good.
it to the whip's office and we
Must have
help
got a
work
real
with
good
all of
experience.
that. Yeah.
Understanding everyone.
Yeah, and making sure they're working well with their
I didn't
teams.
even know we had something like that.
Yeah.
That was really
It
interesting.
was a new info.
Yeah.
New info.
I mean, some people saw on House of Cards, the main character was
True.
the whip of the party in
Because
the
the
US
word
there.
whip is a little scary.
Yes, yes. It's symbolic.
Symbol. Yeah.
Obviously, we would not dare use the whip at this
Right.
point. But yes, it is a symbolic word, and I think that's where the disciplinarian part of it becomes. It becomes being in charge of your group of members of parliament within your party, knowing how they're going to vote, knowing where they're going to be, approving
Mhm.
any
Getting a good pulse of
travel.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
approving any travel or all of that goes through the chief government whip.
Minister, inform us before we will conclude your interview this afternoon. That what do you think after this pandemic? We have got several issues coming up, like massive inflation. All the things are upside down. The health system, affordability, housing. So it's a problem of the provincial and the city governments also. But is federal government looking into these issues?
Absolutely. Since the pandemic, we have really worked hard to tackle the problem of inflation. Of course, monetary policy is also within the jurisdiction of the Bank of Canada, but economic policy is under the jurisdiction of the Government of Canada. And we have been working hand in hand to make sure that inflation comes down. We are now under 2%.
Yes, today only it was 0.25% was reduced.
Yeah,
Yesterday, sorry.
that was the interest rate.
Interest
But
rate.
since last July, we have been under 2% in terms of the
Inflation, yeah, correct.
which is back under our target range.
Mhm.
2% is our target range, so we're under that now. And in terms of interest, yes, 2.75%, so we're under 3%. We hope this helps stimulate and help people that are having a tough time right now. Interest rates, remember, had to be brought up by the Bank of Canada because inflation was so high.
Yes.
Inflation was at 8 point something percent.
Yeah, correct.
We are now under 2%.
Under 2%.
8.9% year after year. We were accelerating at a very high pace. We are now under the United States in terms of our inflation levels. Inflation there, actually, in terms of some of the President Trump's choices that he is making these days, or non-choices, the instability that is being created in the markets because of the the conversation that he has been having when it comes to trade and his allies has created inflation to actually rise again in the US. And that is going to be of great concern, I think, to Americans. That will also obviously have an impact
Definitely
on us
us
too.
as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we're trying our best to work with
Come back, yeah.
the
That
president. We
Mhm.
currently have our finance minister down there in Washington, D.C., along with a few other ministers and the
the
Premier,
Premier
of
of
Ontario.
Ontario, correct.
Yes, yes.
And we're trying to make sure that we continue to have the conversations that are needed. It is very important that Canadians do understand that the doors have never been shut. We have constantly been in communication with the Trump
Trump
administration,
administration, correct.
and we will continue to be. We are their number one customer. So although President Trump talks about trade surpluses and subsidizing our economy, that is not what is happening. Anything that the U.S. buys, it is because they are not. It is not because they're forced to buy our
No.
products.
It's the requirement.
It's because they are wanting
They're
to
wanting
buy.
it to buy,
They want
correct.
it,
And
yeah.
and a lot of our integrated systems have been extremely successful in being able to produce cars, for example, very efficiently and at better prices than what could be created if we didn't have this working relationship.
sure.
And so it's really important that all the auto manufacturers are also coming to the Trump administration and really letting them understand that
That
in
true
order
impact.
to unintegrate this market, as Minister LeBlanc had put it, our finance minister, we already have an omelet, and you can't just decide tomorrow that you're going to unscramble this omelet
Right,
Yeah.
right.
and now have sunny side up
Sunny
eggs.
side
Yeah.
egg, yeah.
It-
True, very
That-
true. A
that's
good
not,
example.
It's
Good
not
example.
possible. And Flavio Velope, who is the head of Automotive Manufacturing Association,
Mhm.
he has also made it very clear that it would take at least 5 years for manufacturers to move
Yes.
and set up
Yes,
new
and work quick.
lines and have them be as efficient and making profit the way as they are right now.
Right now.
5 years is a long time
True.
unless they are provided any type of monetary incentives. I don't see that companies that have already committed to Canada, invested a lot of money here, and are finding good skilled workers in Canada,
Definitely.
that it would be in their best interest to leave.
Would you like to give any final message, comments for our viewers? And even I would like to request you to get in the end, if you can speak in Punjabi to your Punjabi
Yes.
in a constituents.
Absolutely. ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਇੱਕ ਵਧੀਆ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਈ ਆ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਮੁੱਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ, ਪਰ ਅਖੀਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਵਕਤ ਹੈਗਾ, that is the economy and jobs. And ਮੈਂ ਇਹ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ that ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਬਹੁਤ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ to make sure that your jobs are secured, that Canadian workers will be supported, and that our jobs, good paying Canadian jobs, will be kept in Canada. We are working day in and day out from all levels to make sure that the threats that we are facing from our friend in the United States, that threat is diminished, and that we also take this as an opportunity so that ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ trade agreements negotiate ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਗਈਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਬਹੁਤ trade agreements ਅਸੀਂ 50 ਗੁਣਾ ਵੱਧ trade agreements negotiate ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਨੇ, that ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ companies ਨੂੰ assist ਕਰਾਂਗੇ so that ਉਹ ਨਵੇਂ markets ਨੂੰ access ਕਰ ਸਕਣ and ਨਵੇਂ customers ਵੀ ਲੱਭ ਸਕਣ. This is going to be something that we will have to be steadfast in, and I just want to request ਵੀ ਸਾਰੇ Canadians ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਵਕਤ ਉਹ united ਰਹਿਣ, and to make sure that we will fight this fight together as Canadians, and we'll make sure that we continue to be a sovereign country, and the benefits that we have will remain Canadian benefits, and that we work on improving those benefits as well.
With that note from Honorable Minister and guest speaker of this episode, Honorable Ruby Sahota, we thank you once again. You made time to come to our show, and we will be calling you soon again as the elections are approaching.
Thank
So we'll be hearing that time about how your riding is doing. and all that. So we'll have a shorter interview very soon by April.
Yes, I look forward to it. Thank you
So
so
with,
much.
with that note, we'll be concluding our this episode of Voice of Canada. Your host Asphandiar Wadiwalla, co-host Cindy Young. We'll be signing off soon. We'll be saying good night, goodbye. God bless Canada. God save our King.
Good night.